Is Vladimir Putin in trouble? Is Donald Trump calling the shots? Where is the Russia-Ukraine war going? And wow, how do you reconcile the very, and one might even say radical differences in how each the Russian side and the Western / U.S. side sees each other? There is a lot of things to unpack here today. We have a new guest on our show today. I'm really excited to have today with Konstantin Rozhkov, of the host of the Real Reporter YouTube channel. He puts out some great stuff. I watch it a lot, and we've even, I think, used some of it on the air before. At least I've based some of my information off of it. Konstantin, I wonder if you can just kind of tell people a little bit about who you are, because one of the things you've addressed on one of your videos on your channels, you have virtually a flawless English accent, and most people think that you're just an American, but turns out you're actually not.
You're too kind, but thank you. Thanks for having me. So yeah, my name is Konstantin. I'm Russian. I live in Moscow. I've been doing journalism my whole life. But 3 years ago, I started this YouTube channel. It's called Real Reporter, where I started to, show how things are going in Russia. The show took off, and I'm happy and, well, I guess you could say successful YouTuber at this point.
And one of the things I've found really enlightening about watching your stuff is that you seem focused on just talking about what's actually going on and not so much on just putting a certain narrative out there. How does that factor into how you cover the news?
Well, first of all, my job was always a reporter. I was on the ground, on the spot reporter. That's what that's where I thrive. And so I'm not a commentator. So this is something new for me. So for me, it was just an easy format to just, go somewhere and show this place and just, especially when the Russia-Ukraine war started and there has been a lot of demand for information, what's really going on in Russia. And so just to give you an example, I went to this draft office and enlistment office in Russia when the mobilization started back in 2022. So I just interviewed the guys like minutes or hours before they were sent to, well, not at the front, but to the training ground. And that made for a very fascinating video that almost reached 1 million views. So, I kind of took from there and, continued to doing on the ground reporting with as little bias as it possible.
And speaking of the topic today about how the different sides view each other, one of the common accusations, I guess, among the West is that Russian media is, of course, all propaganda. Everything they do is just a mouthpiece of the Kremlin, and they just do everything they can to support it. And anything that doesn't follow the Kremlin narrative gets subordinated or actually outright attacked. What is the real situation in Russia? Because, and let me preface that, I'm sorry, one more thing. Like in the United States, we have CNN and MSNBC, which kind of give a slanted view to the right. You have Fox News and Newsmax, which kind of give a slanted view to the left on MSNBC and Fox of MSNBC, and then Fox and Newsmax to the right, et cetera. Is there a similar dynamic in Russia, and how would you just characterize the landscape?
Well, there are media that are state-run and state-controlled. They're like major TV channels. They're all controlled by the media. I worked for one of them, RT, but also there are a lot of opposition media. A lot of those people who are in the opposition, they fled the country in 2022, but those media are still available through social media. Also, there's just a bunch of, like, a lot of Russians, they receive their news from Telegram. This is a messaging app, but also a place where you can gather all the news and information. And so there are a lot of channels there, independent, small channels. And so, yeah, you have this mixture of sources that are available to, everyone who lives in Russia.
And so in the Western world, we'll keep the United States specifically, we kind of self-select where we go. There's a lot of people will get into different, what they call echo chambers, where I only want to hear information from the CNN view. So I'll go to that and I'll reject anything else. And others are on the right media, and whether that's podcasters or the actual, television channels, et cetera. Do you have a similar dynamic in Russia, or do you have a case where they listen to a lot of different things and try to make their own assessments?
Well, I guess it's just the same as everywhere. Like people tend to get into an echo chamber. Is just it's a matter of a personal choice, I guess. Especially with the social media, you click on one thing on YouTube, and so the algorithm thinks that this is what you like, and you receive another suggestion, and then you click on it too, and then how you get into this rabbit hole of information. So it's up to I guess. A person to actually make an effort to distinguish between the resources and find something from that side, from another side. So, and I try to be that guy who gives you a perspective of what's going on in Russia without any spin on it, and hopefully I do the good job.
Well, and that's that. I've seen that. We actually have. In fact, Gary was showing some of it a second ago when you interviewed one of a drone operator from Russia. Yeah, that one right there. We've shown that we did actually quite a bit on that. We thought it was fantastic because of how open and honest it was. He admitted where Russia wasn't doing great in some places. He admitted where the Ukraine side was doing good in some other places, etc. And then where the West was, doing bad. He was pretty open about all of it. So we appreciated you providing all sources, which is why we wanted to have you on to get that similar kind of view on some issues happening right now. And one of the things that are going on right now is there's been this acceleration in the air war on the Russian side, commensurate with what appears to be anyway an acceleration on the ground as well. And just overnight, we had another round. That interview we just showed you there a second ago, that was primarily on the first-person view and the tactical drones. These are on the more the operational strategic drones that are going in, yeah, there was another big, huge one in there. Now, interestingly, when you look at the track of all the drones that come in, especially the last few nights, you can see that they're literally coming from all around the borders of Russia and Ukraine. Some even coming in from the Black Sea, etc. But the Ukraine side continues to claim that they get like nearly everything down. In fact, last night they claimed they got every missile, all the cruise missiles, Kinzhals, and the various versions of that. And they got almost all of the drones too. Like I think they said 412 or 430 or something like that. 25 total only got through out of nearly 486 that were fired. How do you find that reporting? Is that accurate?
Well, I think that's par for the course that every side that's involved, entangled in a war, would minimize its losses and damage that it has sustained, and would maximize the losses and the damage of the enemy. So you gotta take what they say. It applies to both Russia and Ukraine, and just divided by two, and probably somewhere in the middle you get the real number. So it's really hard to actually rely on the official information when it comes to assessing damage and losses. So, and interestingly, what I've noticed is that when it comes to Ukraine, they only show when it hits, or when a civilian or residential area is damaged, but they never show if they hit piece of military infrastructure. No one would, and again, this is par for the course, no one would want to show their actual losses. So you can't judge by this, what's really going on.
And meanwhile, on the ground, you have continued advances in the Konstantinivka and the Pokrovsk area. There's almost a pair of cauldrons that are forming there. There's now activity going on the Dnipro province, which hadn't happened until just recently, along with Sumy and Kharkov regions. There's additional pushes down in the south in Zaporizhia. I mean, it looks like everywhere the Russians are advancing a little bit faster on the ground and in more areas, and their air war is escalating. What does that tell you about the Russian capacity for war?
Well, this is actually interesting because I've spoke with a Russian expert who's very well versed in this matter, and I asked him why we don't see swift advancements like we've seen, like we saw in World War II. Why is just tactical gains all the time? And what he explained to me is that this is how this war is playing out. It's kind of a swing, right? So Russia is it's probing different sectors of the front, And whenever it sees there is a weakness, and it tries to exploit it, but then you can go only so far because of how many drones are in the skies, and how easy it is to stifle that advancements with all the drones and other surveillance and technology. So, and then they probe another sector of the front. So this is kind of a swing. They try, that sector, Pakrovsk, then they try somewhere else in the Sumy region. And so it's kind of cat and mouse game. And whenever there is a weakness or an opportunity to advance, Russia tries to exploit it. So, and I guess this is kind of a game where they just hoping to catch Ukraine. The Russian side is hoping to catch Ukraine on that movement, and catch it off guard. But so it's not about
what from what you're hearing anyway. What is the operational objective of these things? Meaning, is it to just continue to whittle away and have a grind down effect of a war of attrition, so that at some point, who knows when, all of a sudden there won't be enough troops to come to the front? Or is it to try and punch a hole somewhere and then to have operational forces go in behind it? What is your understanding?
Well, my understanding that this war has turned into a war of attrition. So it's about the grind. It's about to wear down the enemy army in hope that they would eventually, fail to provide enough reserves for a certain sector of the front, and maybe there would be maybe the front will collapse locally, and then you can exploit this. So it's not about how much territory or how much villages you will take in that attack, but just what effect this might have on the military. You kind of try to degrade them, little by little, step by step, every single day. It's like when you look at the mirror every day, you don't see any changes in your face, right? Because you see yourself every day. But then if you haven't seen someone for 6 months, and you suddenly see him, and you can tell that there's a big difference between right now and then. So my idea, my guess is that this is where they're aiming for. The Russian side is aiming for, just to gradually wear down the Ukrainian armed forces. But whether they will succeed in this, that remains to be seen.
And at least from the folks you talk to in the Russian government or positions of authority, does Russia feel like that they can continue this path, I don't know, indefinitely and eventually succeed? Or do they think, well, it's an open question, maybe we will, maybe we won't? How do they view it?
Well, I haven't spoke to anyone in the government or in the position of authority. I'm not that kind of YouTuber. I don't have access to that, but I do have access to a lot of experts who are not in the government and who are just knowledgeable about what's going on at the front. And so their understanding is that it's just a wait and see approach from Russia. Russia has the numbers. Russia has manpower. Russia claims that it can recruit up to 30 men every month to compensate for the losses and to build better reserves. And also Russia has ramped up its military production. I just made a short video from this giant, enormous drone plant in Kazan where they produce this Geran drones. This is kind of backbone drone force that Russia uses when it strikes Ukraine. And so Russia has the manpower.
And on that point, in fact, Zelensky said 2 or 3 days ago, I think, he claimed that soon Russia was going to be producing enough of those Geran 2s and whatever other variants to be able to launch not 500 or 600, but 1,000, possibly even more per night. How does that match up with what you understand about the production rate? And is it continuing to increase on the Russian side?
Well, it certainly does. If we take the Ukrainian statistics of how many drones are used every time in a single wave of attack, it's getting bigger. It's increasing. So now the Ukrainians claim that Russia can send up to 600 Geran or Shahed drones, as they refer to them. In Russia, we refer to them as Geran drones. So now it's up to 600, and it was like 200 or 300 at a time, like back in like 3 or 4 months ago. So the production is going uphill. That's for sure. Yeah. So, but there's a lot that goes into it. Technology evolving pretty fast. Now, what's going on at the front, specifically in the drone warfare, from what I understand, is that both sides are also developing what they call intercepting or drone interceptors. These are like smaller but very fast drones that should take down those loitering munitions or Shaheds and Geran drones. So I guess in the next couple of months we'll see how this one go. Whether the Ukraine will have enough resources and production capacity to build enough intercepting drones, or Russia will outproduce it with the number of strike drones that it has. So it's a wait and see.
Fascinating. That's what we've seen throughout this whole war, I guess, is action, counteraction, counteraction, whatever, evolution, escalation, et cetera. So I guess this is just the latest iteration of that. I want to shift gears here and kind of to focus really more on perceptions and how each side sees this war, because that has a lot to do with the support for the war and where this thing may be headed, because there's a combination of things that are inextricable, and that is how people view it and how long they're going to support it, but then also physically what happens on the ground. Because if you don't support something at the national level, the people don't support it, it's going to be hard for the government to continue operations, whether it's Russia or the Ukraine side here. But it also, there's an issue that it doesn't matter what you think to a certain point or how much you support something, if the ground is going to be moving in one direction, at some point that'll overcome your perceptions. But let's take a look at how different the two sides are right now, because when a lot of people keep using this term that, we're trying to have a negotiated settlement, who's got different views on that, but you don't see any movement on it. And I think the big reason is because how they view each side. Let's take a look. First of all, let's kind of pin this on the July 3rd phone call between Vladimir Putin and Trump. I think it's the last one that they've had. And there was very different interpretations coming out of it. Trump rather, come out saying he was disappointed and upset at Putin for how he talked on the phone call there, because he didn't give Trump what he asked for. So Trump was surprised that Putin didn't give him the unconditional ceasefire, and so now he's upset and has changed his actions. Meanwhile, Putin come off as looking polite but very consistent on what they're looking for. And I want to show you yesterday what Dmitry Peskov said, that what Putin said is during the readout, what Putin said on that July 3rd phone call is the same thing they're saying yesterday.
Возможно все-таки и в таком формате, или она должна быть именно подготовлена?
Она возможна, и со временем она обязательно случится. Она необходима. Возможно, она будет необходима и для фиксации каких-то крупных договоренностей, которые со временем будут достигнуты после того, как будет проделана огромная работа. Но пока это время еще не настало. Эту работу еще только предстоит сделать. И да, Россия готова двигаться быстро. Нам главное достичь своих целей. Наши цели понятны, очевидно, они не меняются. Но процесс зависит не только от нас.
So how do you view the Russian side? Because I heard over the weekend a certain expert that I have talked to that said that the Russian side has no actual intention of negotiating anything. They're just going to take what they need on the battlefield because they don't believe there's any chance that the West or Zelensky or Trump will actually give it to them, but that's what you have to do. You have to go through the political niceties, which kind of looks like maybe that's what Peskov is saying, that we're going to talk. There's a lot of work to be done, but these unchanging goals on the ground are apparently sacrosanct.
I think that the narrative that the Russian authorities don't want to engage in any meaningful peace talks doesn't hold up if you look at the record. I really like to remind everyone that Russia was very eager to participate in the first significant peace settlement that took place in 2022. And there was this round of talks in Istanbul in 2022, in May of 2022, where both sides were very close to reaching a deal, not a ceasefire, but a deal. It was not 100% agreed upon, but there were just a few details to work out. But Ukraine actually was that side that backed away from that deal. So were they behaving irrational? No, I think they were very rational. They just thought that, with all the Western backing, with billions of dollars in weapons, with the intel and all that, they could just defeat Russia on the ground and regain all the territories that they lost by force. Well, that didn't happen. And so, coming back here to 2025, my personal belief, like I have no, what do you call it? I don't have an in with any in the position of power within the Russian government, but my personal belief as someone who lives here is that Moscow would really like to have a peace deal. It's not offered one. I think what it was offered is a ceasefire, unconditional ceasefire. But that's, I can understand why Trump seeks something like this, because this would help his image as a peacemaker, and he would really like to take credit for any peace settlements that are happening around the world at the moment. But well, I guess the way Putin sees it is that he is not interested in a temporary solution or in freezing the conflict, but would rather have a more sustainable settlement that would ensure that, both sides that will remain neighbors for the foreseeable future will have some sort of a meaningful way of living together. And I just think that there's nothing on the table at this point to agree to. I guess that's
well, and then we're going to see how that's going. I don't know if the word is escalating or deteriorating, because over the weekend here's how former General Jack Keane viewed this on Fox News.
I think the president demonstrated extraordinary patience in trying to work with Putin, despite all the happy talk and playing tough on the battlefield that was going on for weeks and weeks. And then ultimately completely frustrated with him. And Putin wanted that to happen, but he thought the president would likely pull away from supporting Ukraine. And so Putin has miscalculated here. And what we got here is clearly the president's decisiveness to support Ukraine. There's still arms flowing right now from the previous administration and the Congress's support for funding that took place many, many months ago. So that is happening. It paused for a while, but this week, 155 artillery ammunition is flowing again because of the president's order. 2 PAC-3 missiles for the Patriot system flowing again, and HIMARS long-range missiles flowing again.
So apparently that's the response to Putin's desire for a negotiated settlement. You say they're looking for some kind of a deal, and so far all we're given is, well, we're going to keep the arms flowing. And like you said, we want a stop of the war with no conditions and no end state, et cetera. And Russia's apparently not interested in that. So the question is, if Trump continues on down his path and Putin continues on down his path, what's going to happen on the ground?
Well, that's a good question. But I think another thing that we should, take a look at is that, right after Trump announced that he's going to, right after he announced that he was pissed, with Putin for not agreeing to a ceasefire, and that he's going to apply tariffs, 100% tariffs on Russia. There were a lot of meetings between Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, and his Chinese counterpart. Then Lavrov met with Xi Jinping in China. This just happened in the span of a couple of days. So I guess what happened, it's my guess, that probably Moscow went to ask China, hey, what if Trump, does what he promised and put tariffs on you? Will you gonna support us? Are you gonna? Can we count on you? So we don't know what happened behind those doors, but this is something to look at for sure. And about the tariffs, this is also interesting. Like, how far can Trump really go? Because we all saw that U.S. tried to impose tariffs on China. This didn't have anything to do with Russia, but I think it was around 34%, and it was just too much. And he had
got up to 145% at one point before it came back down.
Yeah. So he had to cut down, and now they came to some sort of an agreement. And now he's going to, put another 100% tariffs in China, and not just China, but also India and Brazil. Yeah. Can he really do this, or this is just a bluff? I guess. Well, maybe Putin is not convinced.
Probably for good reason, because we have some experience with that. One other thing I want to show you from the U.S. side here before we're going to get into some an article that was in the Washington Post, which I think is really encapsulates the different way that the two sides see this. And I'm going to get your view on how the Russians see these a number of specific issues. But first of all, this one here kind of even got me a little bit surprised that I saw this morning. Washington Post columnist Max Boot actually says that Ukraine is winning the war.
They have said that Ukraine just can't win this war in Ukraine.
Well, I think the evidence shows that Ukraine is winning the war because since the initial Russian invasion, the initial Russian invasion was actually in 2014, but since the Russian invasion ramped up in 2022, Russia did make some immediate gains, but since then, there's hardly been any change on the battlefield. I mean, Russian troops are advancing at a pace slower than troops were on the Western Front in World War I. For very minimal gains, Putin is paying a very heavy price. I mean, Russia has lost roughly 1 million troops killed or wounded, huge numbers of tanks, artillery pieces, armored personnel carriers, aircraft, ships, all these other types of military hardware. So Russia, and despite all that, Ukraine continues to function as a pro-Western democracy. I mean, I think anybody who's been to Ukraine during the war, as I have been, comes away incredibly impressed.
I find that hard as somebody with combat experience, and has certainly studied war most of my adult life, to see how you can claim one side is winning when you actually detail how much the other side is advancing. And the other side is in the losing side, whether it's fast or slow or medium speed. If you're losing territory in men, I don't know how you consider that a win. How do you respond to that?
I've encountered these comments a lot, not just from that journalist, but elsewhere. But you can flip it around and say, Russian regime hasn't changed. Putin's still in power, and Ukraine also lost 1 million soldiers or sustained 1 million casualties, and its economy has taken a toll, and it hasn't regained its 1991 territories. So I'm just using the very same arguments that this journalist used, and just in a reverse situation. Does that constitutes Ukraine's win? I don't think so. And there's this straw man argument that I always, run into a lot, is that, Russia promised to take Kyiv in 3 days, but it failed. I've never actually heard anyone saying this.
The only one I ever heard say it, and I did hear it, it was Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who said that he thought that Kiev could fall in 3 days, right before the war started, not afterwards. I've never seen anybody from Russian side say that.
Exactly, not in public, not that I know of, and so you have this argument that Russia allegedly said that it would take Kiev in 3 days, and it fails, and then Russia failed to achieve its goals. Well, I don't know. I would say that Russia does pay a price for taking part in this war. There is no way to sugarcoat this. We have losses. We have casualties and all that, and this has put some burden on the economy, absolutely. But how do you know if a country is winning or losing? If you look at the map, Russia's been advancing. Yes, there was tactical gains, but as I mentioned, one of the perspective that I've heard is that it's not about the territory that you gain, but how much losses, how much constraints you put on the enemy side. Probably, they might think that one day it will just the Ukraine's army will just collapse because it won't have enough resources and stuff like this, and then this advancement would go from being tactical and small to strategic and operational.
Yeah,
it's just hard.
And I want to ask you, speaking of the losses that the Russian side suffer, that's a number I keep hearing a lot by a lot of Western media and officials, is that Russia suffered well over 1 million casualties. They, of course, they're mum on the side of the Ukraine. Other sides are not so mum. But what is and I know Russia doesn't release official stats, but what's the best you can gather How many has Russia actually lost, killed and wounded?
No, Daniel, I'm not going to go in there. I just, I have no idea. I really don't. It's going to be just a shot in nowhere from my side.
What do people in Russia think, though? Whatever the number actually is, do they feel like it's too high, that it's sustainable, that it's necessary because of what's at stake? How do the Russian people feel?
Well, I don't know how to put it, but for one, I can't really say that I don't have people who went to the front from the circles I run into. I do know of people who went there. I do know of families where their loved ones lost their lives, soldier on the battlefield. But maybe it's not that significant or not that bad yet. I don't know, because I don't see this being talked in public, or some kind of a behind the door rage that is growing. Maybe it's just not in the circles that I run into, Yeah, but it's really hard to guess, because again, I live here, and I know that when you lose someone in war, that's a tragedy. You can't kind of downplay this. Even when you lose one life, that's a big tragedy for your family. So I can't say that we'll just shrug this off and we'll just keep going. Yeah, go on. It's not like that. It's not like this, but. When people claim so nonchalantly that Russia is at the end of its ropes and it's lost just billions of people and is just going to collapse tomorrow, those claims seem far-fetched, I'd say.
I see. That's fair enough. All right, I want to go to this that Washington Post published over the weekend, an editorial or an opinion piece in there, in which made a number of claims. And I want to start off with this. Putin sticks to Ukraine war despite erosion of Russia's global clout. That was kind of the headlines, which kind of got my attention, because with the escalation or advancement, rather, of like the BRICS, and I've seen Sergei Lavrov literally just flying all over the world to meet with people. I thought, I haven't really seen that, but let me see what they had to say. I'm going to read several things here that the author made and kind of get your view on them. This first one here: Putin's failure to capitalize on Trump's concessions, that was an interesting right off the top, sets the scene for a war without end and boosted the long-held view within his hardline coterie of security officials that Washington will always be an adversary. With Trump's harsher tone towards Putin, Russia analysts are once again depicting the war as central to the messianic Russian struggle against the United States and the West. And Gary, keep that one up there. I'm gonna pause for just a second. The issue or the claim here is that this is not so much about any military things on the ground or strategic stuff, but Russia's messianic belief that there's always going to be a struggle against the United States. Is that a fair assessment?
No, I wouldn't go that far. No, it's not the sentiment amongst regular people. Even though we've been through a rough patch with the United States over the last 3 years, I would still say that amongst regular people, there is we think that Americans are good people. There's no animosity to a degree, where there is
interesting,
like it was, I don't know, back in the day, I would imagine, when the Soviet Union fought the Nazi Germany. No, it's not like that. And I think that also the Russian government is very eager to patch things up with the U.S. I'm pretty sure about that. And they were very pleased, I believe, when Trump's administration reached out and they held the first round of talks in Saudi Arabia. So I don't think that we should take Putin's, well, as the way they put it, refusal to Trump's concession as his hatred or his deep distrust or animosity towards America. I don't think that's the case. I think, like I mentioned before, I think that's just the reason we don't have a deal is just because there wasn't any meaningful proposal on the table yet.
Yeah. We'll see if that comes into Gary. Go ahead and throw the second one up there, actually, instead of going back to the first one here. It says that Putin, they say, made a colossal strategic error. What they wrote is, while Russian officials depict Putin's determination to carry on fighting as necessary strategic choice, Western analysts see the refusal to compromise as a strategic error with a colossal price tag in terms of international clout, markets for its energy exports, and global allies. Russia's main allies in the Middle East, Iran and Syria, have been severely diminished, and it's losing traditional friends in the Caucasus and Central Asia. Tellingly, its chief arms supplier is now the pariah state of North Korea. A couple of things in there. First of all, I'm not sure that you want to try and shame Russia by saying that they're getting help from North Korea, because at least according to reports I read last week, North Korea has provided over 12 million artillery shells. So I think the West would just love to be able to provide that kind of support to the Ukraine side, but they can't muster it. So I'm not sure that's an evidence of Russia's failure in the international. But what do you think about the larger point that Russia is losing international clout and its allies in both the Middle East and in Central Asia?
Well, Russia did lose its energy markets in Europe. So I guess you could give it to the author of this article. That's not a good thing. I'm not going to argue with that. But then Russia was able to find new markets in the south with China and India. And so they're now buying Russian oil and Russian energy resources. And I think there are talks about building a second pipeline in Western Siberia that would supply natural gas to China. So could you say that if this war stops tomorrow, Russia would immediately regain those European energy markets? I don't think so. Plus, there's an interesting point that I don't know how much people know, but a lot of Russian natural gas now goes through Turkey. And so from Turkey, it becomes this kind of a Turkish gas, and then it is being supplied to Europe. So in a way, Russia kind of clung on to the European market as well. So as far as shaming Russia for receiving assistance and help from North Korea, I think you're right. It's just I don't think that people who make these decisions think in these terms, or this country is pariah, or it doesn't have a good reputation. We're not going to use their soldiers. North Korea actually sent its troops to support Russia's operation in the Kursk region, and they played a huge role in that. So that's a good ally, and right. No one has sent troops to Ukraine.
Right. Yeah. So that's just the way they view it. To the American audience, it's like, these Russians, look at that. But then you're like, wait, but what you're pointing at is actually kind of positive from their side. I'm not sure that's good for us either. But we continue on there. The next one is that Putin, though the Russians always claimed that this was about NATO expansion and about their national security, the author says that while he added that while Putin has been driven partly by concerns over NATO expansion towards Russia's border, there's also the sense that he is, quote, exacting revenge on Ukraine for not being an obedient client state like Belarus. That is deeply irrational, even fanatical, but it's one of the many reasons why I think Putin cannot separate himself from this war. Is Putin driven more by NATO forces coming into Ukraine and all the things that they've said there with the root causes, as Lavrov says a lot? Or is it that, no, he's just upset that Ukraine is no longer being a client state like Belarus?
Well, again, I don't like to speak for Putin, but if we look at the facts, if we look at what happened back in 2022, both sides were close to this agreement. And one of the key points in those agreements were that Ukraine would be a neutral state and would not seek its NATO membership. And, that was enough for Putin back then. So, and over the course of these 3 years, he's now this irrational person who's on a mission to punish Ukraine, and he's gonna, he's hell bent on doing what's the objective. I think that would be a very serious gamble to just take revenge on the country, and because things could go south. I don't think that's the case. I think Russian government is very much interested in seeking some sort of a peace settlement, but the one that would help to solve this crisis, for good.
Yeah, and before I go to the next one here, somebody just popped up a question here I want to ask because I'm curious myself. How do people in Russia feel about the Kursk offensive and the fact that it took 7 months, I guess, to get them driven back out? But how did that change any views they may have had toward the Ukrainians?
Well, the views of the Ukrainians, took a deep dive because I don't know how much people know, but it was widely shown on Russian mainstream media and on Russian television. The discoveries that the Russian soldiers found in the Kursk region when they liberated that part that was occupied by Ukraine, and there were a lot of people with who were tortured, who were people who were tied, whose hands were tied, and they were shot in the head. So we also there's been a lot of reports about people kidnapped from those parts of the Kursk region. And interestingly, in one of the latest prisoner swaps that Russia and Ukraine had, in one of them, a couple of dozens of people, civilians, women from the Kursk region, were actually brought back to Russia. So I don't know if a lot of people knows this, but so from that, we know for sure that some of those people in the Kursk region, Russians, were kidnapped or taken into Ukraine for whatever reason. So, all those reports, of course, they, kind of sets the tone for the relationship.
Yeah, no, I get that. I certainly do. Going back to the article, one of the biggest things you made an allusion to it a second ago is that what's on the table now that may be coming is Trump mentions at the end of this 50-day timeline, which I think expires sometime in September, is that if there's no deal by then Trump's going to slap some more tariffs on secondary tariffs on like China, India, Brazil, et cetera, and anybody else who does business with Russia. Although, ironically, as you say, that some of those customers are still in Europe, so I'm not sure how that's going to work out. But one of the claims was, back to this article, if you could put that last one up there, is that Putin's rebuff of Trump's major concessions, barring Ukraine from NATO and letting Russia keep the territories that it seized, suggests that his determination to fight on is not centered on protecting rational Russian security interests and appears to be more emotional fixation for Putin. Putin is very bluntly and simply, the war is an immense strategic blunder from Russia, and it's a war that that it is not a war that Russia can win in the long terms. The costs are unbelievable. And that's one of the issues on the table, is that can Russia hold up economically? Now, we've been trying to do this from the beginning. Joe Biden said he was going to put crippling sanctions on Russia, was going to collapse their economy. That obviously didn't happen, probably caused more harm to the European economy than it did to Russia's. They figured out how, as you said a minute ago, to get alternative routes of business and selling their products, and especially the petroleum, to other customers, et cetera. But that question came up at a conversation that Putin had just yesterday about car manufacturing.
I had discussions, you could say, with my colleagues in the government who held the same view you're expressing now. They argued that there was no point in us investing in the automotive industry. They said we had fallen hopelessly behind, that it was better to buy cars abroad and at best allow large-scale assembly operations here so that consumers could purchase good cars at low prices. In general, they believed this was better for the consumer. But there's another side to this coin. Some countries produce while others only consume. And if we're talking not just about technological leadership, though we should be, then at the very least we must talk about technological independence. Secondly, some nations consume while others produce. And this is a major category of goods. If we were to buy everything with oil and gas revenues, and now we're in a situation where they're trying to cut us off from oil and gas exports, then Russia would simply lose its competitiveness, and with it, its sovereignty.
So he seems to be saying, hey, we need to keep the production here, because if we get these sanctions that cut us off and we're not able to produce anything, then we're going to be at a strategic disadvantage. So the question is, do you think that Russia can continue on, if there's more sanctions, that they continue to endure under those sanctions and continue to survive? Or is there a risk that this could cripple Russia?
Well, it's interesting because I remember that back in 2022, when those sanctions were just introduced, I was very pessimistic, and I think a lot of Russians were as well, because we didn't know, what would follow, and we actually thought that would be way worse than it actually is. I'm not saying that sanctions do not have any effect. There are a lot of inconveniences that they create. Just to name a few, using my Russian bank card, I cannot pay with it abroad. It's just such a pain to receive any payments from abroad, for me being a YouTuber. And it's just, there's so many things. By the way, a lot of Western IT giants, they restrict their access to their products like ChatGPT or some other products, software that I use, say in editing. They restrict access from Russia. So there's a lot of stuff that, we have to go around. But speaking of, what's going on in economy in general, we thought it would be worse, really. And I guess a lot of people were very surprised that we actually sustained that. Well, Vladimir Putin cited an example of the car market. There was a better example with the aircraft market. The Soviet Union had its own line of aircraft, but we backed away from this, and we switched from to an ill aircraft, Boeing and Airbuses, and where we're now we're stuck with these planes that is hard to maintain and operate, and we don't have fully domestically produced Russian planes. I have actually a report from an aviation plant in Siberia, where they're now working around the clock to build the first 100% domestic Russian-made passenger jet that would be the equivalent of a Boeing 737. It's called MS-21 with Russian engines. But I think it's still a couple of years away from serial production, or and so there's a lot of issues with that. So on one hand, there's a lot of inconveniences and problems that have been created by these sanctions, and I guess you could say that there's also a lot of opportunities to create something here locally. Well, aircraft is something very complicated, and it's a complicated thing to create. But for instance, we have a lot of domestic clothing, apparel brands in Russia. That was easy to replicate, and one might wonder why we didn't do this before. I guess the competition was very high with all those American and European clothing brands. So now we have our own Russian-made clothes, and which is very decent, and all that. So you have pros, you have cons. Bottom line is that the challenges and the complications that these sanctions have created are probably not that severe, so that the whole country is going to revolt.
And relatedly, and just in the last few minutes we have here, let me ask you: can you foresee a circumstance that, let's just say that Trump at the end of this 50 days actually does slap these tariffs, and somehow they end up working, that they get China or India or Brazil or any of these other countries to actually change their prohibition? Instead of buying Russian oil, they don't, and so that lowers the cost, or rather the revenue that Russia can receive, and so it actually starts to have real impact on the economy and on the daily life. Is there any level of pain that's going to cause the Russian people to say, you know what, it's just not worth it, let's just end the war on the best terms we can get and get these sanctions lifted off of us? Or will they say, maybe hearkening back to the Great Patriotic War times, where they would pay any sacrifice as long as they achieve their security interests? How do you see that?
Well, I think this number of 50 days has been thrown out there, and I think we should keep an eye on it. I think something will definitely happen. I don't believe in 100% tariffs on China, Brazil, and India, but I think Trump's administration may come up with something similar to what the European Union did with their 18th package of sanctions, where they targeted, they did this, precision, surgeon kind of sanctions, where they targeted certain ships from the shadow fleet, or targeted certain companies that buy Russian oil. So maybe Trump's administration would come up with something like this. Another possibility is that he may come out and say, hey, but Russia and Ukraine actually engaged in meaningful peace talk, because I don't know if you know this, but by the end of this week, I think there will be the third round of talks between Moscow and Kyiv and Istanbul. And by that time, they're going to complete all the prisoner swap. And so in theory, they should start discussing the memorandums that they both sides presented. So probably there's something happen on this track, and this would allow Trump not to impose those punitive measures that he is threatening Russia with. So,
right, but just look at the worst case scenario, though. If it happened and if it was biting, is there a scenario to where there could be enough economic pain that the people of Russia would tell the government, hey, this is just too much, you have to stop this war no matter what?
No, I don't think so. Not at this point. This ship has sailed. If something of that caliber could have happened, it could have happened in 2022, not right now. Now Russia is, keeps its economy going, and we're in that sense we're stronger than we were in 2022 in terms of self-reliance and and all that. So I don't see this coming.
That's part of the negative reaction of overusing sanctions, is that you, in a sense, make Russia sanctions proof, or at least sanctions resistant, to where that you can't compel them to do anything. And now then, what do you do now? If you don't have any more weapons to apply and you're not going to go fight a war, then we have what's left on the battlefield, which is not good for the Western side. But
we'll build our immune system by those sanctions year by year.
Put.
But hopefully it won't come to this, and maybe we'll see a solution, or
that's certainly our hope too. We want to see this, and we advocate all the time that we want an end to this war to be found with the best terms that can be available, that every side can at least stomach, to get the killing to stop, and all the people dying on both sides to end. That's our number one priority that we advocate here as well. So thank you very much for coming on today. It's been very enlightening, and we really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on this.
Thanks.
And we appreciate you guys too. Be sure and like and subscribe. And we have Andrei Martyanov coming on this afternoon at 2:00, a little over an hour from now, kind of looking at an update on the tactical situation, as only Martyanov can do. So join us then on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and we'll see you then.